Welcome to Planetary Health First, Mars Next. My name is Michael Mann. I'm the host moderator today, and we got a really exciting topic on all things longevity, kind of moving the needle. And NO, if you don't know, that's not no, that's nitric oxide plus AI, nutrition plus genetic therapy equals keys to cracking the nut or the code, or however you want to say, to longevity. And we have some amazing guests here. We got Tom at the bottom, who you're no stranger to on Planetary Health, leading the charge with venture capital, 20 some years, seasoned venture capital, running a $100 million corporate fund. And we got Dr. Nathan Bryant, who's all things longevity. I don't know how many products you have out on the market, but I've been a proud user of one. So anyway, we also have Brad Niles, CEO at Arizon Precision Medicine. And if you guys each want to just introduce yourself real quick before we get going on it, Dr. Nathan Bryant, if you want to just start, just a quick intro.
Sure. Well, thanks, Michael. It's great to be with you. Thanks for the invitation. Tom and Brad, it's an honor to join you. Yeah, I've been in academia spent better half of 20 years of my professional career in academia as a professor of molecular medicine. Really all things focused on nitric oxide. How does the human body make nitric oxide? What goes wrong in people that can't make it? Then how do you fix this underlying problem? Published over 100 peer-reviewed papers, dozens of issued patents. We've commercialized a lot of our discoveries over the past 15 years. So I'm excited to have a conversation.
And Tom, anything new about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the listeners might know me from other episodes, but yeah, venture capital investor. I've been doing corporate venture now for the last 15 years. Come out of a financial institution doing traditional venture capital as well. So have sort of an operating backbone as well. But yeah, pleasure. Just a huge honor to be on this panel with some very esteemed colleagues that I know and respect. This is a topic that I'm personally very passionate about from an investment perspective, and just thought this would be a nice assembly of thought leadership to talk about a topic I think we're all interested in. So very excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah. And Brad Niles, would you introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, hi there. Brad Niles, I'm the CEO of Arise Precision Medicine. We're a genetic medicines-based startup in the Davis, California area, working on lung cancer. My training is on the science side. I went to UC Davis, got a PhD in nutritional biology, and then went more over towards the cancer side of things for a postdoc there at UC Davis as well. We got about 7 years going on at Arise, making a lot of progress towards a therapeutic approach for lung cancer. So happy to be a part of things today and excited for the conversation.
Yeah, awesome. And Ilias, I'm not even going to try to say your last name. You are here. You are the man of the second. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Michael. Hi, everyone. Really happy to be in this panel. My name is Ilias. I'm a professor of computer science at the Genome Center at UC Davis. My second hat, I'm also the director of USDA-funded Institute on Food Systems, one of the 25 national AI institutes. And I'm also a co-founder of different companies, all of them around AI and food.
Wow. So this is great. We got a superstar panel. So I think we want to start on prevention versus treatment. Is that a good place where we start?
Absolutely.
100%.
So who would like to take the charge?
I think I'm gonna hand this one to Dr. Brian, given the foundational importance of nitric oxide. And I've interviewed Dr. Brian before and follow his work. So I think he's the best person to kick us off with that.
Thanks, Tom. No pressure, right? No, look, I think coming from academia and being a professor in medical schools and trying to figure out how do we understand the mechanism of disease to the extent that we can start to develop rational therapies. And I think what the science has clearly directed us over the past really 30 years is that prevention is much more effective, both cost-effective and just effective in general than treating disease. And, certainly in the basic sciences, we understand what leads to chronic disease. We know the hallmarks of all chronic diseases. This little microcosm that I live in nitric oxide biology, we certainly understand how nitric oxide production in the human body leads to optimal human performance. It's what leads to, disease prevention. And, through our efforts, we're developing rational therapies. But I think if you look at what leads to chronic disease, it's always, vascular inflammation, it's oxidative stress and immune dysfunction. And it's typically the affected organ has low blood flow or circulation. We call that hypoxia or ischemia. And nitric oxide controls and regulates all those. It's a vasodilator. It's a gas that's produced in the lining of the blood vessels, so it regulates blood flow and oxygen delivery. It inhibits inflammation. It prevents oxidative stress, and it mitigates any immune dysfunction that we see in the onset progression of all chronic disease. And so we now know that the functional loss of nitric oxide production precedes the structural changes we see in disease, whether it's cardiovascular disease, whether it's dementia, Alzheimer's, whether it's metabolic disease and diabetes. That functional loss of nitric oxide precedes these symptomatic manifestations by many years, in fact, sometimes decades. So what my kind of perspective is, if we can prevent this age-related loss in nitric oxide production, we can maintain tissue oxygenation, we can prevent vascular inflammation, and really get to the root cause of what causes most, if not all, chronic diseases. So nitric oxide is foundational for everything we know about disease prevention.
So go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to touch on something, maybe kind of tag someone in on the conversation, because I think, there's presumably, so nitric oxide, we invested in a company in the nitric oxide therapy space, less on prevention, but really around therapy for disease. And so have started to follow Dr. Brian's work around the importance of nitric oxide and how, the body produces less and less of it over time. And so what are some things you can do early on to ensure your body produces more of it over time, and that's a key element of prevention. But a key piece of that is nutrition. And so we'd love to kind of get Dr. Tagat or Ilias's perspective on this, just given that his area of focus is on nutrition, of course, from an AI perspective. So it'd be great to get your viewpoint on this one, Ilias, as well.
Thank you, Tom. And you are almost there. Not my life. So yeah, I completely agree with the idea that nitrous oxide is a key. It's a key element, and we need to be more aware, and we need proactively to actually act. But actually, there are many others. It's a handful of others. Like, as we know, LDL is one, HDL, CRP, angiotensin, and others that they do modulate, and they are part of this. So the question is, how do we manage and how do we prevent disease when we have a complex system as such, right? And this is where nutrition plays a huge role, because it's not like we're taking a drug or having bazookas to kill a mosquito, but actually we have something that is more chronic, something that it's part of our lives. And again, nutrition will play a role on nitrogen oxide and other molecules. And AI, because here's where I'm coming from, right? The AI angle is the way to create that knowledge and process it in a way that is actionable. It will come with clear understanding and clear recommendations on how we can fight aging and how we can have a more healthy life.
So what is the problem right now? Obviously we know our healthcare system is really, it's got the reimbursement, it's after the fact, but what needs to happen to make this as a starting point for today?
Yeah, I think a key byproduct of how healthcare has been developed, at least in the U.S., right? And I think this applies to somewhat of a global scale, is the access to the information that you need and the resources you need to address some of the things that Dr. Bryan and Dr. Togopoulos just mentioned, right? So not everybody. So knowledge is the foundational piece, right? I don't think people are getting the information. Doctors are trained a certain way. They're taught to underscore evidence-based medicine protocols as defined by this kind of payer system that we have. And again, I'm not trying to be provocative here, but the payers are a big component of U.S. healthcare, and so there are protocols that doctors kind of just stay in their lane and provide guidance to patients. So as a result, the onus is on the consumer, the patient, to kind of learn about these other elements, right? And again, there's nitric oxide and then there's nutrition, and I find that nutrition I've recently made a personal kind of change in my lifestyle. A lot of that is nutrition based, some of that is fitness based, but I have found that the onus is on me to digest the volume of work out there and to kind of really filter through the noise and figure out what the good stuff is from the bad stuff. And when I quarterback that with my doctor, he's pointing me in a different direction, and so I think it's challenging environment to be in because of the construct of our healthcare system. I mean, the reimbursement stuff's a different issue here, right? But I think it's more foundational than that. It's getting the access to the right information, the credible information.
Yeah, I would agree. Look, all you have to do is look at the data. I mean, since the 1940s, the nutrient density of the food grown in America has declined by 85%, on average about 78%. And these are micronutrients like selenium, chromium, magnesium, iodine. So we live in a world, and the food we eat is depleted of basic nutrients. And if you go back to the days of Linus Pauling, who was famously said that chronic disease is caused by nutrient deficiency, obviously that's a major problem. But in this world of personalized medicine now, where we have micronutrient analysis, individualized patient care, you can get an assessment of your own micronutrient analysis and then supplement what you're not getting in your diet. And I think that's the foundation of repleting missing nutrients so the body can undergo the biochemistry and do its job. But, I would go a step further, that we have to remove any toxins in the body. And we live in a toxic world. So if we replete missing nutrients, remove toxins from the body, then the body is regenerative by nature and it heals itself. And certainly Brad can add to that on nutrition and how it leads to metabolic disease and cancer, and interested in his thoughts as well.
Yeah, appreciate that. And I think, one of the things that we need to focus on is adherence as well. Even clinical studies, 50% adherence by the patient is a good number for people that are being told exactly what to do. And as you mentioned, Tom, there's so much information out there. It's really hard for the consumer to digest, figure out exactly what they need to do on the prevention side of things. So I think there's always going to be an element of the prevention, but also the treatment. And even if we're following our doctor's recommendations or following the literature, there's a lot of diseases that they can't be prevented or don't have a known cause. I think there's 130 million people in the U.S. currently living right now with a chronic disease, and these are the big names that are out there. Heart disease, cancer, many of the others, and so I think there's always going to be an element of prevention to try and reduce those numbers. But there unfortunately is never going to be a shortage of patients that need a therapeutic intervention as well. And so, it's going to be a good balance. Hopefully over time we can provide more information and teaching to the consumer in order to allow them to make better decisions for themselves, but also to have the treatment options that are out there for things that can go wrong.
Yeah, and if I may actually add here, so I completely agree with everything that was said. It's consumer understanding and knowledge is key for any decision making. What I would add here is, like, we don't really know what's in our food. If you look at the nutritional labels, they haven't changed for quite some time. And if we ask you, okay, what's in an apple, what's in a tomato, and that's one, we don't. Like, we may know 5% of what's in there. We don't know the peptides or glycosaccharides. We don't know. I mean, there's a lot of information that we're missing. That's one. The second is people need to understand, and when I say people, including us in the research world, that one protein is not equal with another protein. So if it has like 5 grams of proteins, what kind of proteins and what exactly do they do to our body? So matching that, what's in our food, getting away, or at least augmenting not only the micronutrients and what are the minerals, but going into peptides, into molecules that are in high abundance, and then figuring out how to connect them with health effects. That's going to be key. That's going to unlock a lot of potential in order to how to prevent and manage our health.
Yeah, I think I think that's fascinating. It's like natural flavors, right? What is natural flavor? So anyway, I'll stop.
Yeah, I think just kind of like kind of summarizing what folks are saying. I think information is key, but I think similar to what we saw with patient engagement and in the digital health space. I've been a digital health investor for 15 years or so, and the holy grail for provider empowerment is information, but too much information can be a little confusing, right? So I think what Ilias is talking about is interesting, right? Like, what would I do with all the information that he was just calling out, right? The peptides and this or that. I think current nutritional info is confusing as it is. I think it has been very static, but I think there needs to be a way to, it's like garbage in, garbage out. More information confuses people, but maybe there's an opportunity for artificial intelligence or predictive analytics or whatever you want to call it, to summarize that information and provide the consumer what should I do, right? So okay, this has so many peptides, but what does that mean for me specifically? And I think this kind of calls into action this kind of like, I feel like this holy grail of digital health, which is precision medicine, right? So I have condition X, Y, and Z. Brad was saying 135 million people have these chronic diseases, right? So, well, how do I get myself out of that funk, right? And what do I need to do? And tell me what to do. Very oftentimes, patients do what they're told to some extent if it's explained to them in a very logical way. Like, you do this, this will happen. And so I think again, I just kind of go back to like the information, but also compiling it, summarizing it, put it into a form factor that really makes it actionable for the consumer. So I don't know if you all have thoughts on this, but I don't have the answer to it, but it's there needs to be either some type of application, some type of protocol that allows consumers to maybe a one-stop shop for all these issues, right?
Yeah, I
But
think
also in a way that allows people to so-called cheat on those recommendations as well, right? People are always going to go for that ice cream at night or whatnot, and so coming up with a plan that allows that or takes that into account, certainly needs to be considered.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think Brad makes a good point. I mean, the problem is sugar. I mean, 9 out of 10 Americans are metabolically unfit, and it's the sugar's the problem. I mean, we've all spilt a soda or sugar on the counter and come back the next day and it's sticky. Well, that's what happens in our body. I mean, we measure this through hemoglobin A1C. Glucose, which the root is glue, it's sticky, and it sticks to hemoglobin. And what people don't understand is that proteins and enzymes have to undergo some conformational change to do their job. And if you've got too much sugar sticking to these, then these proteins and enzymes can't undergo their conformational change. Hemoglobin can't deliver oxygen. Many enzymes can't convert and do their job. So if we can eliminate sugar and basically rid the body of that, then the normal metabolic processes can occur. But we're bombarded with things, and now people are trying to get their nutrients in gummies and chews, and sugar stuck to everywhere. And I think it's a fad, but it's a very dangerous fad. And I think it's one of the the worst things we can do is try to get our nutrients in the forms of sugar-laden foods and gummies and chews and simple carbohydrates that are converted to glucose. So it's not all about calories in and calories out. It's about the quality of those calories. And no matter what you do, if you consume more than you burn, you're going to store that as fat, as glycogen, and you're not going to be healthy. So it's more complex than we were once thought to believe. It's the quality of the calories. It's making sure we remain active. But really, I think the key thing is eliminating sugar, or at least limiting the sugar to where, our proteins and enzymes don't have sugar molecules stuck to it, where they can actually do their job.
Well, what's your take on this GLP-1 craze? So I've, as an investor, I've seen hundreds of companies, maybe a slight exaggeration, dozens of companies kind of like hit my desk that are either addressing the GLP-1 craze from a therapy perspective, but also from a kind of IT-enabled services perspective, helping patients get access to GLP-1. To me, it just reading about it seems like a little too good to be true. To Brad's earlier point, 135 million people out there could probably benefit from this. I think I read a statistic somewhere that the total, if everybody that's eligible for GLP-1 took it, it would be almost twice the size of the pharma total addressable market today. So I'm not sure that's sustainable, but what does everyone think about that? Because I'm a little bit skeptical, but I'm also it sounds promising. So I don't know. I don't know enough about it, I guess.
Well, I'll start here. Look, I think they have their place for people who can't lose weight, who've gone on all these diets and spent 20 or 30 years and unable to lose weight. I think it's a great crutch and a tool for them because they're very effective at kind of limiting your appetite. And so again, if you're not hungry, this whole concept of grazing throughout the day, your body never has a chance to recover. And so the data on intermittent fasting, caloric restriction, especially as it relates to longevity, is very convincing. And I think it's indisputable. So how do we get people to intermittent fast and to restrict their caloric intake? And if you're missing these glucagon-like peptides and you're not having any type of satiety throughout the day, then you're going to continue to eat, have these cravings. So I think it's a good thing for these people. I think there's a space for it. And I think the data are starting to come out. There's some improvement in metabolic flexibility with these at certain doses. But it's just like anything you're given. You have to mitigate you have to understand the side effects. You have to understand the risk and then take the steps to mitigate the risk. And the big ones are gastroparesis, right? You get paralysis of the stomach. It leads to a lot of GI distress. If people are not eating for 24, 48 hours because of these drugs have suppressed their appetite, then you start to break down protein. You get bone loss. You get muscle loss. You see it's called the Ozempic face now. The skin starts to sag, and people look unhealthy. But if you can take amino acids, some branched chain amino acids every morning, if you're fasting, and prevent protein breakdown and turn on protein synthesis, then you can mitigate these. And obviously nitric oxide helps with gastric motility and prevents gastroparesis. So if you understand that, and look, everybody's going to respond differently. But I think they've certainly changed, weight management, and if you can utilize these drugs and working with your physician, what's best for that individual patient while mitigating the side effects, I think they can be extremely beneficial. But not for the lifetime of the patient. I think it's a bridge to, and I think what I'm hearing is that it really allows one to divorce the cravings and the psychological aspects of eating. Because I tried these for about a month because I was interested in them. I'm always like, okay, if there's something new on the market and improves my metabolic flexibility, then what it allowed me to do, and I grew up poor where our parents said, you have to eat everything on your plate. If you put it on your plate, you got to eat it. So we're conditioned like that. But what these allowed me to do, and I just used them for 2 to 3 weeks, is it completely divorced the psychology of eating with what I need and reach satiety. So now when I don't use them, I can eat what on my plate. When I start to feel, full or start to sense some sense of satiety, then I just stop eating. But I also don't eat a lot of simple carbs. I eat a lot of proteins, and I'm physically active. But for me, that was probably the biggest epiphany for me was there is a psychological aspect of these GLP-1 agonists that divorces the psychology of eating with just why we eat is to convert this food into metabolic energy so the human can thrive and do its job.
So, Dr. Brian, what have you heard in terms of rebounds after going off these GLPs? Because I've heard a number of folks, and the body, of course, is very good at maintaining homeostasis. And so any improvements that you're going to make while on the drug traditionally go away once you go off the drug.
Yeah, but look,
you mentioned your own experience in kind of a retraining. I'd be curious to see if that's more common or more rare.
Well, look, no matter, there is no silver bullet, there is no panacea. At the end of the day, it's all about discipline. And no matter what you're trying to do, you have to have the discipline to change your life. I mean, some people need help with these, and other people just have the discipline themselves to just say, look, I'm not going to eat, or I'm going to change my diet, I'm going to change my lifestyle. And they don't need, a drug therapy to help them do that. But I think what I'm seeing is that this allows people, and when you start to see results, people become more motivated. But, fad diets and people going on these diets, they don't see the results, or they see results, they don't stick to it, and then they get the rebound effect, and they end up gaining more weight than they lost with that. But at the end of the day, you've got to change your mindset. You have to be disciplined to make those changes. And I think the beauty of, from a lot of the case reports that I've seen and people that I've talked to that have been on these is they see the physical effects, but their body feels better. They have more energy.
Mm-hmm.
They're more metabolically active, and they start to enjoy life again. And that's a huge motivator. They spend more time with their family, their kids. They enjoy life more. And that's a main motivator. But again, it all comes down to discipline and sticking to a program.
What's the balance between physical activity like cardio and strength? What would be a recommendation? I know everyone's different, but if we're talking about nutrition and for longevity, how does that put in the mix?
Well, I think it depends on your individual goals. I mean, straight cardiovascular training has been shown to prevent cardiovascular disease. It stimulates nitric oxide production, and it's a great preventative. But for building muscle mass and preventing bone loss and muscle loss, we have to have some resistance training, especially on the bone and muscle. It's always a balance between bone breakdown and bone buildup, the osteoclast and osteoblast. And it's the resistance training, it's the resistance on those bones and muscles that allow for you to build strong muscles, build strong bones. So I think it's a balance, and it's about individual goals. If you're looking to lose weight, then you got to burn calories, and you got to understand your own anaerobic threshold to where you're specifically burning fat and glucose and not breaking down protein. So I think that's where it has to become individualized. And, what are you trying to achieve? For me, at this point in my life, I'm, 50 years old, and I'm physically fit. And so my goal is about maintaining. And I've been, plus or minus 7 or 8 pounds for the past 40 years. So I haven't had these extreme weight gains or weight losses, but I have to work at that. I travel, every week, 200,000 miles a year, but it requires a lot of discipline for me to get, when I check in the hotel, go to the gym. I always do 20 minutes of cardio. I do resistance training, but in 40 minutes, I'm in and out. And then I just try to watch what I eat. But, for bodybuilders who are trying to build, tone and muscle mass, that program is completely different than what I'm trying to achieve. And somebody trying to just lose weight and increase their health and longevity, that's, probably looks different.
Yeah, I don't have a scientific, I don't have the scientific credentials to answer this question, but from what I've read, it's really all about balance. Like I think what Dr. Brian's saying is a good point. If you're a bodybuilder, then yeah, obviously go to strength training and limit the amount of cardio that you do. Although I've read about bodybuilders doing some cardio as a form of balance, but I think if you do anything to the extreme, if all you do is strength training to the extreme, that can have a negative impact on longevity. Just kind of tying this back to what we're talking about on the panel, right? I think what Dr. Brian is elucidating here, which is a balance of a little bit of strength training, a little bit of cardio. That's probably the that's probably the sweet spot. And depending on maybe your genetic makeup, depending on your nutritional protocols, you can probably vary that a bit. But from a personal perspective, I've been doing a little bit more strength training because I was doing a lot of cardio back in the day, and I lost some weight, and I noticed I was getting a little weaker. My grip strength is I've read is a key element of longevity. It's a good biomarker for how long you're going to live. So I read a paper on that. It freaked me out, and I realized, man, I got to get back in the gym and start doing pull-ups and push-ups, right? So yeah, I think it's all about kind of balancing kind of both sides of the equation here.
So I'm a bit of a rascal here. I love food. I have no self-discipline. If you try to, stop me from eating what I shouldn't, I'll probably yell at you. So it's very personal for me. So the question is like, what do you do with people like me? What do you do? And I'm hearing you guys, and there is so many people that they are like you, and that's great. That's discipline, part of your lives, and you're doing it for many years. My focus, and again, as a director of an AI institute that is paid by taxpayers' money, which I focus on public health. So I want to see how can we impact the life of many in the United States and across the world. And many of our friends and family, they don't have the luxury to actually hit the gym all the time, or maybe they lack the discipline as I do, or many of those they love food or whatever. And the question is, how do we create products and put products in the market that can help the majority of people? Because we all know what's right for us: the right diet, right exercise, no stress, good life, right? I mean, we know exactly what we should do in order to live longer. At the systems level, right? We may missing some information on molecules, or that's very specific, but at the system we really know. So what can we do? How can we create products that it will ameliorate, will improve the lives of many? How can we? So we're talking about the Ozempic. And Ozempic works. It's not, it didn't come overnight. It was like the product of a lot of sleepless nights from people in, research labs for 30 years plus. And it does work, but there are problems out there. First, like people that get out of Ozempic, they're put on weight. Second, it does have some correlation. I wouldn't say causation, but correlation with some other diseases, and it's not for everyone. It's great, by the way, in many other ways, but like cardiovascular, etc. But it's how can you create? Can we create milk that is great? It has the chronic effects. Maybe it's like Ozempic, but it can regulate our satiation and nutrition needs. Can we create everyday products that they can supplement our dietary or exercise? I mean, these are the things that it would be great to think of how we can leverage our AI and all the new developments in nutrition in order to deliver that.
You mentioned that, and going back to the discipline comment that was raised earlier in this, can we create products that, it's all about sensors now and understanding what's going in your body and tie that to readouts that tell you what you need to eat at that particular time? Or, we live in a world of smart devices. Can we connect this to the refrigerator? And so the refrigerator locks when your body's, high in, circulating calories. Can we manufacture discipline through all these smart devices that are in, part of our lives?
You're going to have a lot of people breaking into their fridge anyway.
No, I think the way we do that is this concept of restorative physiology. The GLP-1 agonists, these are glucagon-like peptide agonists. So what that means is these are naturally secreted molecules in the human body. So we're not giving this body something that's foreign. These are peptides. There are other ways to activate and stimulate GLP-1 naturally in the body. So what I always try to do, and I'm trained as a biochemist and a physiologist, is how do we understand the enzymology and the biochemistry to the extent that we can restore it and recover it? And what I'm finding is that pharmacology is not the answer. Synthesizing a drug that inhibits a biochemical reaction isn't the solution. It kind of masks the symptoms, but we're so far away from physiology. And I think that's why, 50%, 55% of the drugs that are prescribed in the world are prescribed in the US. We have the sickest population on the planet. So it's obvious to me that drug therapy and pharmacology is not the answer. It's really getting back to the basic biochemistry and physiology. Again, we're giving the body what it's missing so it can do its job, and removing from the body any toxins that may be inhibiting the body from doing its job. And that whole concept is restorative physiology. And that's what we practice with product development, with drug development. Understand what the body's missing and let's give it back. It's really hormone replacement therapy. If your body can't make testosterone, what do? We give you testosterone. We don't give you precursors and substrates and go, well, let's close our eyes and cross our fingers and hope your body can do it. No, we have to give you these molecules. And the GLP-1 agonists obviously are missing, and their secretory abilities are missing in people who, constantly eat and don't have the discipline. So if we give it, we induce satiety, and people start to lose weight. And that's just one molecule in a very complex biochemical roadmap that makes up the human body.
What is the best way to give testosterone? I mean, I know there's all these things. Oh my gosh, if you're on Instagram or whatever and you're a guy, you see nonstop. It just seems like it's a roadmap for disaster. Can you do more harm than good?
No, absolutely. Like, you have to mimic physiology. And so typically testosterone, when we get testosterone release, it's a transient effect. And so I'm not a big fan of pellets, because that's not how the human body produces testosterone, where you get chronic levels of, say, 600 to 800, which is kind of their target. Testosterone is a signaling molecule. It's kind of like nitric oxide. You make it upon demand, and then it signals these second messenger systems. Mm-hmm. So you see the spike in testosterone, but then, it's gone. But it's initiated these signaling cascades. It's kind of like, it may be the first domino, then it tips over all these other dominoes that do the job. But you have to mimic physiology. And that's different certainly in women who have menstrual cycles and their hormone fluxes throughout their menstrual cycle and their periods, where men, if you just want to look testosterone, then let's mimic, say, a 18 or 20-year-old with optimal levels of testosterone, and then let's track that throughout the day, what stimulates its release, what it's doing, and then let's mimic that natural production. But you can't outsmart the human body. I mean,
Dr. Brian, what's the ability to kind of simulate what naturally occurs in the body? Do doctors, do the clinical world have the sensing technologies and capabilities to do that and simulate it, or is it still really sort of in the experimental phase today?
In terms of testosterone, nitric oxide, or any hormone for that matter?
Any hormone for that matter. Yeah. I mean, do we have continuous sensing technology? It doesn't seem like we do. How does what's that delivery mechanism look like without it being, to your point, you come into the doctor, you get a dose of therapy, which is a huge spike of some signaling molecule, which is not natural, right? How do you address that, I guess, is my question.
Well, I mean, the data is out there. I mean, the medical textbooks, the physiology textbooks, we know the endocrine system. We know, what endocrine glands secrete what hormones at what rate and what flux. And we know the pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. So, yeah, the data is out there. It's just that doctors don't have the time to spend with individual patients to get a clear picture of what their deficiencies are. Medicine, I found, is a business. And, you have to get the light. You have to generate revenue to keep the lights on. Yeah. And today, unfortunately, because of the reimbursables, you've got to see 60 to 70 patients a day to maintain some type of profitable practice to pay for all the overhead. And there's no way in hell you can ever get a complete medical history of a patient in 2 to 3 minutes you're spending with them. So it's all about understanding their symptoms. Once you make a diagnosis, then you have a finite response to what you can prescribe based on that diagnosis. If you operate outside the standard of care, then you're not doing your job. And if you prescribe something outside of the diagnosis, then you're not going to get reimbursed for it. So it's a business.
So you're saying So the information's out there. We know
Absolutely.
what the model should look like, but a 20-minute fee-for-service visit isn't going to cut it, right? And so there's got to be to Brad's earlier point, right, about just to talk about sensors for a moment. We are investors, shameless plug, of a company in San Diego called BioLink. It's public knowledge what they do. It's an aptamer sensor. It's multi-analyte sensing technology. So it's essentially a patch you put on your arm. There's no needle. There's microneedles that sit in your kind of interstitial fluid, which doesn't hurt. It doesn't scar, and it could pick up any molecule, any analyte that you want to sense. So if you wanted to track BioLink with a Q, by the way. Sorry, I just have to correct the spelling there. But it's a cool technology. So if you wanted to say you put a patient on you do the 20-minute visit with the patient, right? You get their basic vitals, and then you put them on a BioLink sensing tech, and then you say, look, we know what we want your testosterone to look like over this period of time. Let's actually sense the testosterone continuously over some period of time and get your therapy calibrated properly, right? And if something looks out of whack, you can kind of scale back some of the doses or the pills you're taking, or you can even, we're looking at possibly being able to pick up nitric oxide. Unfortunately, nitric oxide has a very short half-life, and so very, very difficult to pick up, but it would be pretty awesome if we were able to kind of do that as a proxy for how much nitric oxide is this person producing, how much testosterone, et cetera. So again, kind of a utopia, if you will, but that's kind of where our heads are at with that investment.
And in theory, that could be applied to metabolites and other things circulating in the bloodstream that could give you a better sense of your nutritional profile or your metabolic profile. That kind of gets back to the timing and amount that we need to eat as well, right? Tom, is that kind of the idea?
That's right. That's exactly right. And ideally, disease biomarkers would be kind of interesting, right? Cancer is an area of focus, although I think there's a lot. Again, I don't know enough about the biomarkers there that can get picked up in interstitial fluid. But the idea is catch disease early, track therapies in a precise manner, and then kind of triangulate that with the outcomes of the patient, and ideally get to a better place with medicine outside of the four walls of the hospital, right? Because I think that's the disadvantage that we have, right? The four walls aren't enough to give the patient a complete protocol or a complete therapeutic protocol.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the future. I mean, the continuous glucose monitoring, I think, has changed a lot of people's habits because many people don't feel when their blood sugar gets above 300. Some people do, but now with this continuous glucose monitoring, people sense when their blood sugar goes up, they go, what did I do 20 minutes ago? And yeah, if I ate that bowl of ice cream or ate that candy bar or whatever, then it's a mental trigger and go, shit, I can't do that anymore. Look what it did to my body. Yeah. And doing that over and over again for 5, 10, 15, 20 years is, you're on a pretty slippery slope to chronic disease. And so I think glucose is just the first of many of these continuous monitoring devices that we can, I think certainly you can probably do it as technology improves for other hormones, maybe insulin and testosterone and growth hormone and things like that. But then that gives people a mental cue of when these substrates start changing and you start to see and you get an alert, then, okay, what did I do to do that? And then, okay, I don't want to do that again. So I think it's a good way that you can start to change people's habits because you may not feel your blood sugars 400 or 500. You may not feel when your insulin gets to 10, 15, 20. But if you've got a device that tells you that, they go, oh, that's not good. Then you can make changes.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So that BioLink's beachhead market is actually CGM. So we're entering that market. Going after the big dogs, Dexcom, Abbott Libre. Those are some 800-pound gorillas that are going to be difficult to wrestle. But the team at BioLink is actually compiled of former Dexcom, Abbott, and Medtronic folks who, those top three make up 95% of the CGM world. So we're hoping to get even 1% of the market. 1% would be like over $1 billion. So we'll take it. But it's the challenge that I see, and this is a question for, maybe for Ilias, which is, I've played around with the CGM myself. I've worn it for a couple of days. I've even worn the Dexcom, and it's a lot of like to kind of our earlier discussion about garbage in, garbage out. A lot of information overload when you get the CGM. So you get kind of like there's almost a gamification to some extent of the curve. You see your glucose levels spike. You see them come down. You see them go back up again, come down. They go down when you sleep. And it's pretty cool, and you get addicted to looking at the chart. But because there's so much data flow and there's so much activity being conducted by the patient, it's really hard to assemble like what does this all mean for me, and what should I do to keep my glucose levels at an all-time low consistently, right? So I think that these sensor companies do a good job of the sensing, but they don't do a really good job of the AI, the number crunching, and the meaningful insights for that. So curious to kind of get your perspective on that, Ilias, if there's opportunities there to enhance these companies.
Spot on, Tom. There is a lot of opportunity to integrate all of these results in a way that is frictionless, and it is easier to have an action by everyone, right? By the final consumer and user. Right now, as you said, it's interesting, and if you track it, and if you're paying attention, and if you have those devices, because sometimes I've seen people who use them and they stopped, and it was not easy for them. It's something that you need to make it even more easy to access and easy to interpret. Again, imagine a world where you don't have just one sensor, but you have everything that matters, and it's not everything in the world, but everything that matters is monitored. It is getting together, it's integrated, and now you don't get values. I don't want to know how much my glucose is. I want to know what I can do to actually be more healthy. Yeah. And that cannot be that I'm going to have peptide A or peptide B or whatever. It cannot be that I'm going to go for a run for 30 minutes. I'm not going to do that. I'm sorry. I'm not going to do that. But if I'm going to choose something, if I'm going to drink a different beverage, if I'm going to eat my favorite chocolate, or I go to, for a sushi, but it's going to be like different ingredient in there, has like something, a peptide that does something that will stop me from eating, or it will lower my glucose, man, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to pay for it, by the way. I'm going to do it in a heartbeat, right? So this is the world that I would like us to live in, because I'm lazy.
So you're thinking of like the Willy Wonka bar that does good things for you.
Exactly.
That's right. Very interesting. Yeah, I think going back to your earlier point, Ilias, about engagement rate and the type of consumer that you are, right? You're not going to go out there and run an ultra marathon tomorrow just because trying to lower your glucose levels and all that, right? I think so. That's the point. I think that's the, I think the common, having invested in health and wellness companies in the past, I think that's the crux of it, is figuring out who that person is in the population, right? I think we have our kind of movable middle, right? Like the vast majority of the population is kind of a little bit lost. They're not willing to get out of bed and just run a half marathon for the purposes of, or they don't even know what they're supposed to do. And so we call those the movable middle. I was talking to an entrepreneur the other day in the medication adherence space, and they call that the movable middle. And they're focused on that part of the population. They're like, that's the easiest. Like, you just tell them what to do and they'll do it. But then you have stubborn people And I won't go there on this podcast, but some people are more stubborn than others, right? And so, and those people, they are very well informed. They know what to do, but they've got a different perspective on it. They health and wellness means something different to them, right? It might mean eating something versus exercising and this and that. And I kind of fall into that on the opposite side of the spectrum, right? I do like to eat, but I also like to exercise. So, but I get really, when I set my mind to something, I just stick to it and I want to stick to it. And sometimes I miss the forest for the trees. And those are sort of, I guess, the outer bounds of the population. And there are other companies targeting those folks. And some people say, well, if I take the least engaged patients at the most difficult patients to go after, if I get 1% of those are the ones that are increasing the total cost of care, and there will be a more meaningful savings for the entire health system. I don't have an answer. I think the answer is something different for everyone. And that's something I think the health and wellness industry and the digital therapeutics industry hasn't really figured out yet. Is you can't approach every person the same way. And again, I think that in my mind, that's the opportunity for generative AI, right? Generative AI has the ability to do that. It's not a silver bullet, so to speak, but it could be, right? And you gotta at the end of the day, you gotta get people to move, right? And you gotta get them to make that next best action, right? But I think there are a lot of opportunities out there for that.
Yeah, but I think unfortunately the sad reality is that people don't make a change until there's a crisis, because fear is the number one motivator, and it's not. We don't live in a proactive kind of medicine is reactive.
Yeah.
Right? We don't go to the doctor until, and sometimes the first sign and symptom of a heart attack is sudden cardiac death. How do you overcome that? You don't. So it's really this reactive approach to medicine that, people don't make changes until they've had a heart attack, until they've had a stroke, or until they've lost a leg or a toe to amputation because of their diabetes, and realize that we're going to lose more limbs and they're going to lose their eyesight and all that. Then they're fearful. So then and only then do they make changes, but the damage is done. I think we have to change the way we approach health and longevity and be proactive instead of reactive. And I think the only way we do that is to open people's eyes to what's going on inside their body. And I think these continuous monitoring devices that give them insight into things, the consequences of what they're doing or not doing, they can see it in real time and then start to correlate with how they feel, how their body responds, and the onset of hypertension or erectile dysfunction, and start to make these correlations. Then, I think people will be more motivated to take action before there's an event and before there's fear of dying or, not being able to have sex or losing a limb to amputation because of their diabetes.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I will go back to it's not only educating them, and it's also giving them a real option, and the option should be frictionless. It should be as easy as possible. Look at the history of mankind, right? Like what really took off. Like look at when, for example, we had the first mass-produced car, or when we had the personal computer being again adopted by everyone, or where electric cars. And look what's happening. Like what changed? The technology was there, right? It was just too damn complicated. Like everybody knew, but you wouldn't actually like imagine computers before Windows. Why Microsoft became big? Because before that it was DOS, and you had to actually program and command line. It was like too difficult, right? So I think we need to spend more and more time in things that they're simple, like they're impactful, they're simple, and they can really lead the masses. Again, that's why I'm so passionate about food, because everybody's doing it, and it's very nascent in terms of discovery. And we are having now the tools for the first time, going from mass spectrometry, going from AI, going from computational methods, general analytical methods, to figure out how to create the next generation of food, because the whole system is ripe for disruption that will change completely the way that we are feeding ourselves and we are making ourselves healthy.
So, Ilias, what could that entail? Because you mentioned the difficulty of, I'm thinking, cholesterol numbers or blood pressure. Or, I mean, those are things that you get told by the doctor, and you're like, okay, I need to work on that. But it's a longer process. Mm-hmm. Could that be we just need more biomarkers that are more transient and where you could see a more immediate response? People nowadays, of course, are much more immediate. Do we just need to have more biomarkers out there that are earlier upstream in the pathway where you could see a change quicker?
Yeah, that's a great question. I believe that, so we have a lot of biomarkers that they do exactly what you're saying. We need a better integration of diagnostic tools in a way that it is, again, very easy for us to interpret, and it should be ubiquitous and, periodic, if, lack of a better word. So, why not? Like right now, I don't know my risk for cancer, for different parts of cancers, different kind of cancers, and I need to really go there and ask my doctor to get a blood test for XYZ in order to have a risk assessment. Why not making that more regular? First of all, right? Better diagnostics, and the second, so it's not exactly better biomarkers, although that will help a lot, but better diagnostics that they are more streamlined. And the second would be, again, going back to solutions that are easy to adopt.
Well, I think we have to have better biomarkers. I mean, the notion that cholesterol causes heart disease has been a fallacy for the past 40 years. And yet now, cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease. I think the data are indisputable. Now, it was once thought, 30, 40 years ago, and with the introduction of statin medications, these cholesterol-lowering medications, the American Heart Association in the 1980s and early 90s predicted that if cholesterol caused heart disease, they would completely eradicate cardiovascular disease by the turn of the century because they had cholesterol-lowering drugs. And now we know cardiovascular is still the number one killer of men and women worldwide. So targeting cholesterol has had no effect. And I think it's contributed to the onset and progression of chronic disease. These cholesterol-lowering medications are mitochondrial toxicants. They're causing type 2 diabetes. They're causing cancers. You need cholesterol to make vitamin D, testosterone, estrogen, and getting your cholesterol below 200 is the worst thing you could absolutely do from a physiological standpoint. And it has no effect. In fact, I think it's worsened heart disease and other chronic diseases. So it's not the biomarker. We have to have the right biomarkers. Cholesterol is a worthless biomarker for disease prevention and the onset and progression of cardiovascular disease. So you've got to find something that really will have an impact on relevant endpoints, and what is that right biomarker in that right patient that you can track that really is going to predict, not only have diagnostic value, but have prognostic value. And we've been misled.
So, Dr. Bryant, why is that this conversation that my doctors, the last two doctors, have had with me the last 5 years? It's been so frustrating. And now all I do is red yeast extract from Costco because I'm still scared.
Well, look, it's the system. I don't blame the doctors. I blame the system in which they're, I taught future physicians in medical school for 10 or 15 years. So it's the system in which the physicians are trained in. Mm-hmm. And it's just, that has to change. And we know it takes on average about 17 years for new discoveries and new way of thinking in science to reach the standard of care, to reach clinical practice. But, there's also these enormous financial and economic forces on the medical system. The companies that manufacture cholesterol-lowering medications, it's a multi-billion-dollar a year industry. I mean, they want to put statins in the drinking water and get everybody's cholesterol below 200. But, I sometimes joke, and it's really no joke, if I wanted to make you chronically ill, and just if we take medicine as an industry, as a practice, as a for-profit business, which it is, and the number one rule of business is never lose a customer. So one, how do we acquire new customers, and how do we retain those customers? If I'm in the field of medicine and I want to retain a customer, the one thing I'm going to do is recommend dietary guidelines, the current food pyramid, limit protein restriction, simple carbs, grains, things like that, a lot of sugar. I would get your cholesterol below 200 to where your testes can't make testosterone if you're a man, your ovaries can't make estrogen if you're a woman, your body can't make vitamin D. So now you become hormone deficient, you become immunocompromised. And I would put fluoride in your drinking water to completely kill the gut microbiome, make everybody have dysbiosis, leaky gut, autoimmune disease. And now you've become the perfect customer for Big Pharma. I'm going to be able to put you on 6, 10, 12, 15 different medications for the next 40 or 50 years. That is a beautiful, there's no better financial model of any business out there. Unfortunately, it's at the expense of us and our health.
Sounds like something I'm seeing or witnessing.
No, we live it every day. I mean,
that's not a bad movie.
Yeah.
No, it's a nightmare. But you know, the way medicine is practiced today and the healthcare system is not sustainable. I mean, again, we spend more money per capita than any industrialized nation in the world. We have the sickest population. So it's not sustainable. It'll crash. The problem is trying to find a solution that will be able to pick up at the time the current healthcare system crashes. And I think it goes back to discipline and accountability and giving consumers and patients the right information, the right education and knowledge so they become empowered themselves. And I think it goes back to the days of Hippocrates. The goal of a physician is to teach a patient never to take medicine. Because if we understand the biochemistry and physiology, which in the basic sciences, we understand the mechanism of every single chronic disease. We've cured every disease on earth in animal models, right? We can knock out genes, we can knock in genes, we control their diet, we control their environment, and we completely heal every disease in mice or rats because we control the environment. That's never been translated into humans because nobody can control the environment. We can't control what humans eat. We can't control what they do. We can't control the environment in which they live. And it's toxic. So we just have to give the right information to people to empower them to take control of their own health, because the answer is not getting sick and going to a doctor. The answer is at home and taking accountability and getting the right information and making the right choices for you. And that may be different for me than it is for Tom or for Michael or Brad or Ilias. It's personalized.
So, Dr. Ryan, what do you think about epigenetics as a way to provide more information to the patients?
Look, I think this whole field of epigenetics, people used to blame their diseases on their genetics, and that's no longer an excuse anymore, right? Even though you may have the blueprint for not being able to translate or transcribe that genetic code into a functional protein, we can turn genes on or turn genes off based on this epigenetic regulation and the transcription of the DNA. So again, it goes back to being able to control your own fate and understanding what you do or what you eat, how does it activate or transcribe certain aberrant genes and proteins, and how do we restore the function of those? That's the solution at the end of the day.
Is there anything
back to the topic? NO is a big part of that, right? Look,
I have a very strong bias, but I think the sciences corroborate what I think and what I believe. But yeah, nitric oxide is an epigenetic regulator. There are methylation patterns. There are certain things we can look at on epigenetic signaling and transcription of our genetic code. But again, it's not just the turning on of genes and expression of those genes into active protein or enzymes. For me, it's about not just the expression, but the function of it. So we can have normal genetics and normal transcription and translation of protein, but if that end product isn't functional, you might as well have a genetic deletion of that, because expression does not equal function, and function does not always equal expression. So we have to maintain the functionality of that end product of the genetic code. And that's the problem with metabolic disease and sugar, because you got sugar that sticks to it, it loses its conformability and its ability to do its job.
Dr. Brian, what is there? We were talking about hormone therapies earlier, right? Transport molecules, et cetera. Nitric oxide happens to be one of them. It's an important one. you do mention it's not a silver bullet, but it's foundational. But what if we had the ability to exogenously bring nitric oxide to people that can't produce it? Again, if the technology were there, would that be the silver bullet, given the vital importance of nitric oxide in glucose transport and all these other kind of functions in the body?
Yeah, I say it's foundational. Your body cannot and will not heal without nitric oxide because it's involved in everything we know about, insulin signaling, glucose uptake, the secretion of hormones from endocrine glands. Nitric oxide is what is the molecule or the signal that tells our own stem cells to mobilize and differentiate, to repair and replace dysfunctional cells. It affects mitochondrial energy production. It affects mitochondrial biogenesis. It prevents our telomeres from shortening. So everything we know about longevity and human optimization can be explained by the ability of the body and the cells to produce nitric oxide. So if you lose the ability to make nitric oxide, you don't mobilize your own stem cells, so you don't repair and recover as you should. You get a lot of senescent cells, these zombie cells. You develop energy deficiency. Your mitochondria become, the electron transport chain becomes uncoupled. You generate superoxide, and you go from 36 ATP per cycle to 2 ATP per cycle. And this aerobic fermentation that you see in cancer. And then the telomeres get shorter at the ends of our chromosomes. And so shorter telomeres, shorter lifespan. So I think what the science is telling us, and we've seen this clinically as we translate our discoveries into product technology and drug therapy, is that you can mobilize stem cells. You can improve mitochondrial efficiency of energy production. You can prevent telomere shortening. And you can maintain normal blood pressure. And hypertension is the number one risk factor for the number one killer around the world, which is cardiovascular disease. So it's not going to replace, a selenium deficiency. It's not going to replace a hormone deficiency. Maybe if we can secrete it from endocrine glands and nitric oxide is just the deficiency in that secretory process, then yeah, but you still have to eliminate from your body any toxins you're exposed to and replace missing nutrients so the cells can actually do their job. But here's what I'm absolutely convinced of is that your body cannot and will not heal or perform to its optimal level or achieve true longevity and health span unless you restore the ability to produce nitric oxide. And, fortunately, we know how to do that. Now it's just, again, it's translation of that science into clinical practice and it's education and awareness to not just physicians and practitioners, but to consumers and patients. And that's been our objective for the past really 15 years is just education and awareness.
So can I just take nitric oxide? I mean, is that possible? Like TRT, right? So I could do that in a clinic, right? Is that possible, or is that a pipe dream? No,
it's possible. I'm here in LA at the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, and I'm lecturing here in a couple hours on hormone replacement therapy. This whole 3-day symposium is on bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And so, we published a paper, Tom, I think you're familiar with it, in 2007, showing that nitric oxide is actually a hormone. It's secreted by one cell and has, endocrine effects. It has systemic effects. And so just like testosterone, if a man is deficient in testosterone, fortunately, we don't have to give testosterone injections into the testes, right? We don't have to give it at the site of production. Mm-hmm. We can give it transdermally. We can give it through an oral troche. We can give it intramuscularly. And so the same principles apply to hormone replacement therapy. Is if we can give the actual molecule, right, we give nitric oxide gas, it'll have systemic effects. And that's been the basis of my technology, because in this 2007 paper, that was the epiphany for me in science, was all I have to do is produce nitric oxide in a single biological compartment. And then it'll go systemic, it'll activate these second messenger systems, and you can completely recapitulate endogenous production and signaling. So I made an orally disintegrating tablet that you put in your mouth. It releases 20 to 30 parts per million NO gas. It goes systemic. We can see dilation of the carotids within 12 seconds. We see a normalization of blood pressure. We can mobilize stem cells. We prevent telomere shortening. We improve mitochondrial biogenesis. And so it truly is hormone replacement therapy. And that technology exists today. So to answer your question, yes, the challenge is, and the hurdles are, training physicians and practitioners, and there's 600 physicians here this weekend that I'll be training on how do we restore hormone replacement therapy, and how do we replace and replete a missing gas? The challenge with nitric oxide is it's a gas with a half-life of less than a second. Testosterone is a very stable water-soluble molecule, fat-soluble molecule. Nitric oxide is a gas that readily permeates membranes. It's lipophilic. It has a limitation of solubility in water. But that's been the challenge, is how do we recapitulate this gaseous hormone to restore its normal function and signal?
Very cool. I know we started the panel with prevention, right, Michael? But maybe it's time we pivot or move into kind of therapy. I think everybody has kind of a perspective on it, and I know that nitric oxide is used, or there's literature that shows it is a therapy, right? It's vericidal, kills bacteria, can kill cancer cells too, and then Brad, you've got kind of a really interesting take on cancer therapy having a better way than traditional chemotherapies. I don't know if do you want to kick us off with your technology and the world you're living in right now?
Yeah, no, appreciate it. And I'll kind of set the stage by connecting us back to exactly what Dr. Brian was talking about. The mitochondria to epigenetic regulation is clearly something that has gone wrong for a lot of patients that end up with cancer. There's a direct cause and an effect line all the way through, including alterations of the histone code, and resulting in a condition in which the patient is very susceptible to carcinogens out in the world. And so that's kind of where we come in. We've identified an opportunity in lung cancer patients where about 70% of patients have a disruption in one of these histone methyltransferases, a gene that is known as PRDM2. And in those patients, there's a methylation and silencing event that disrupts the regulation of transcription of these genes and makes the patients more susceptible. Things like smoking, environmental toxins, age as well is a part of this. As we talk about on longevity here, through these very similar cause and effect pathways. So what we're trying to do is, for those patients that have developed a cancer, what can we do to help them in the safest way possible without the side effects that come with traditional chemotherapy and some of these other cancer treatments. And so for us, this is a precision medicine-based approach. We use a modality known as small interfering RNA, or siRNA. Kind of fits along with this oligotherapies that have obviously become very popular post-pandemic. So we're realizing the potential of mRNA therapies and siRNA therapies, kind of in that same bucket as a way to treat disease. And so we don't have to deal with a lot of the side effects that some of these other therapeutics have traditionally been known as, because we're specifically going in and targeting the genetic cause of the disease itself. And so that's what I think is kind of the other side of the coin to the prevention and the therapeutic side of it in a way that specifically corrects the defect in much the same way that you would be trying to do with the prevention side. We can also do it on the therapeutic side and be able to have a better experience for those patients. So we're early stage right now. We're making a ton of progress. We've got some really exciting data in our animal models. And so it's really just a matter of continuing the development and trying to get to this to the clinic as quick as possible and see what effect we can have on human patients.
Fascinating.
And really interesting that it's it's a lot of these same pathways that we're talking about in terms of nitric oxide. So I was in reading up a little bit more about nitric oxide in advance of this call, and we're living in similar worlds.
That's right.
I think we're all trying to accomplish the same thing here. Everybody's got a different approach to it, right? So Ilias, I know you and I have discussed the role that I think nutrition plays in combination with traditional therapies. And there are startups out there that are looking to combine chemo with nutrition, and there have been some pretty compelling results around how the right nutritional protocol coupled with chemo can result in better results. Again, I think, Brad, you're doing something that obviates the need for chemo and provides a better outcome for the patient and not all the nasty side effects. But in lieu of the fact that it takes time to build a therapy like that, we're probably stuck with chemo for some time, right? But I don't know, Lewis, if you have any thoughts on the world, the role that nutrition can play for cancer therapies.
Yes, nutrition is key for a lot of physiological states, including treatments like chemo. It can be make nutrients more available. It can make molecules more activated. It can make toxicity for non-targets lower. It We haven't. There have been, as you said, Tom. There have been startups and now companies that they are, big companies that they are looking at the role of nutrition. The jury is still out. It's not. It's not. We don't have solutions that work really well in this fascinating area, which I think that needs more research. It's something that we're expecting to see a lot of more development in the next 5 years.
Very cool. I have a personal friend who I won't name his name, but he's a close colleague of mine who recently diagnosed with ALL, which is a type of leukemia, and a young guy, 40, 45, 46 years old. And he's a real fighter. Got the diagnosis literally a month ago. He's at a great facility in the Bay Area, getting chemo, and it appears to be working. But he asked me about, I don't know why he asked me, but he asked me about nitric oxide because he's doing his homework, and he thinks that nitric oxide could be a nice adjunct to this therapy. I don't know, Dr. Brian, what would you say to someone like that who's in the course of therapy for cancer? What can they do to boost their nitric oxide production? What's your advice to that type of a patient?
Well, with any cancer patient, you got to ask the question, why did you get the cancer? I mean, solid tumors are typically formed from an infection, most commonly a dental infection. But blood type cancers like leukemia, lymphoma, multiple myeloma, those cells are typically transformed by some chemical toxicant. So I would always do a full blood analysis and figure out what was he exposed to that allowed for the transformation of those lymphocytes or leukocytes. And then rid the body of what that is. So you just got to dig a little bit deeper. We published a paper in, I think, 2009 on the cardiotoxicity of drugs like sunitinib, these chemotherapeutic agents for renal cell carcinoma. And it's not something specific or unique about sunitinib. It's most chemotherapeutic agents. And so they may do a good job at preventing the cancer cell proliferation and metastases, but they always cause cardiotoxicity. And they're targeting the pericytes around around the blood vessels and prevent the regeneration of that and really leading to vasoconstriction and endothelial dysfunction. But number one, especially in that, you have to mobilize your stem cells to replace those bone marrow derived stem cells that have become transformed. And without nitric oxide, you're not going to get mobilization of those stem cells. So again, it's the basics. If you're using fluoride toothpaste, you have to get rid of fluoride. If you're using mouthwash, you got to stop using mouthwash. You've got to support the oral microbiome, not destroy it. And then if he's on antacids, he's got to get off antacids. Proton pump inhibitors completely shut down nitric oxide production, leading to bone loss, Alzheimer's, heart attack, strokes. And then moderate physical exercise, throw in some more green leafy vegetables. But those are really the keys to good health. But specifically for the bloodborne cancers, you have to figure out what caused the transformation of those cells in the first place and then get rid of it. Then the cancer will typically go away.
Very cool. Brad, is your I know Arise is I don't think you're you're targeting blood cancers, but is there potential to kind of develop your technology into blood cancers down the road?
Yeah, there's a couple interesting angles. I mentioned this family of histone methyltransferases. There's 16 of them in total, and for different cancer types, there's alterations in different ones of these various different PRDMs. It's very well known that PRDM1 is an intimate regulator of B cells, and so multiple myeloma is an outcome that can occur as a result of changes in this PRDM1, or its protein is known as BLIMP1. And so there's interesting angles to pursue throughout this family of PRDMs and a number of different cancer types. We can hit a lot of primarily the solid tumors, but there's some interesting opportunities as well in a couple of these different PRDMs, and the myeloma, some of the leukemias as well.
Well, I know we've had an amazing show today. Gosh, I am so pumped up for all things longevity, from treatment to what I can do to what I need to share with everyone I know. I really appreciate having these. You guys have been amazing. Is there anything that takeaways as we kind of call it wrap up? I'd love to just kind of wrap up and put it on a bow. Tom, do you want to help send us away today?
Sure. Yeah. I learned a lot from this, and obviously I've had individual discussions with each of you in the past, so it's just great to have everybody, talking about this topic of longevity, and would love to see where the offline conversations go. But yeah, I think, the key to longevity, I think, there's a huge kind of foundational component to this, which is the prevention side. And I'm a firm believer in nitric oxide, having a portfolio company in that space, and having gotten to know the privilege of getting to know Dr. Brian. So big believer in that, but also know that nutrition is foundational as well, as that contributes to nitric oxide production. And love to work with Ilias and thought leaders alike about ways that we can use AI to really calibrate our body's ability to produce nitric oxide and other things as well. There are other things that contribute to longevity, as Dr. Tagapoulos mentioned earlier in the talk. But look, occasionally, not all prevention works, and you get a cancer, and you've got folks like Brad who are paving the way for newfound technologies that can make cancer a chronic disease as opposed to a mortal disease, right? So, but I think it's all hands on deck here. It's been awesome to just have this conversation. I think it feels to me like precision medicine. I just kind of lean on this concept of precision medicine. I think precision medicine is going to be a key piece of the puzzle here, as we have everybody, even on this call, has a different motivation, different lifestyle, and different health status, right? And so I think this is where we have the opportunity to use things like generative AI, digital health as a intervention mechanism, and then in combination with therapies, help people to live longer, healthier lifestyles. And it's about promoting health span, not just lifespan, right? And I know we didn't really talk about that today, but that's always been kind of that's always been top of mind, right? It's about the quality of life, not just the quantity of life. And we need to make sure that the quality of life is what's most important here.
For sure.
Well, thank you everyone for coming on today. This has been awesome.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
And then next time we'll figure out longevity in Mars. That will be a different factor with gravity.